This is Gijs Coppens. I'm the founder of OpenUp, and this is the podcast OpenUp at the Workplace. I have a very special guest today. She was the Chief People Officer of the year 2023. She is a Chief People Officer, but she's also a board member of VNO-NCW, and she's a member of the Social Economic Advisory Board. She studied social sciences. Of course, I like that very much, being a psychologist myself. I know it was not psychology, but you also studied psychology and coaching.
Yeah.
It's Caroline Tervoort. Welcome to our podcast.
Happy to be here.
Happy that you are joining us. You are the Chief People Officer of KPMG.
Yes.
But you have done so many more things already in your career. Can you give us a brief overview of how that career went? And maybe not, it could be fact-based, but it could also be experience-based. What is really motivating you? What drives you? What do you really like?
Yeah. So I've always loved people. So I started my career as a strategy consultant and soon discovered that the people domain is really where my heart is. And I stayed in that ever since. And that's, you studied psychology. It's because of the magic of the human brain, but also the social interactions and the dynamics and also the things that can go wrong, right, is super fascinating. And when you are in HR, you touch basically the entire organization from economics to psychological safety and everything in between. And you can really make an impact if you, let's say, put your solutions right. And I like that very much. It's really listening to the business strategy. What do we need? How do we grow? And then what does that mean for your people agenda? And I've done that for, let's say, years and years, but I've switched tables every now and then. So I've been a consultant. I've had internal executive roles. And then sometimes I will switch back to consultancy. And that's giving me quite some fresh perspectives, to also, be relevant and stay relevant in my own profession, know what's out there, and do the right thing. So I think that marks a bit me and my career.
And if you look at all the things that you have done, these fresh perspectives are important to you. You made some bold moves.
Yeah.
You left environments that you were comfortable with.
Yes.
So I guess learning for you is also an important aspect of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are things that you have learned along the way?
Well, I think it's about trusting what you can do, what you know, and trusting yourself to be okay if you just take a plunge and, go beyond what you know. Know that you will land on your feet. And I think that's a sort of security that makes it possible to just take a jump and see what happens. And a very supporting environment helps as well. I've got a great guy at home who supports me in everything, and two sons in the meantime who keep me
grounded,
who keep me awake and grounded. Absolutely,
yeah.
And that helps as well, of course, because if you don't have that, it's easy to say just take a plunge, but you have to be able to do it as well and be supported. Yeah.
I like life the more it develops. And the more you develop in life, it gets more interesting. You know yourself better.
True.
You know what fits you, what doesn't fit you. You also develop that confidence. Was that confidence also always there? Or did it develop over time?
Of course, it develops over time. But I did get a jump start, so to say, with my studies. I went to Berkeley during my studies, and you might say, well, it's a Western society, it's all the same, but it's absolutely not the same, especially not in a university environment where there's so much more competition in the US than in the Netherlands, for instance. So it makes you awake for the bias that you have coming from your, let's say, secure environment. And very early in my life, that opened up my eyes for what's out there, other than your own perspective. But also knowing that you can put me somewhere in a completely new environment and I'm able to, form relationships. I've got friends who I know from back then that I still have, know how to find your way in a completely different environment and how to be successful. So, that's learning for a lifetime. And you build from that.
I fully echo that. I went to Asia after university, and I echo the experience of building it up again in a new environment, and how empowering that can be.
Yeah.
And do you still use some of that energy in your day-to-day work?
Well, I hope so, because I think it's, you're never too old to learn. It's a bit of a platitude, but it is still what it is, right? Yeah. So you experience new things and you have to calibrate and think, okay, so how am I dealing with this? There's so much going on in the world, but also in our organization at the moment. So you constantly need to tune in with yourself and think, is this the right thing to do? What should I do different? How should I meet the team? So you're always reflecting. And you're taking that experience of, being open to other perspectives from way back then. You take that with you today.
I have so much respect for people officers, and I will explain you why. So, I used to do a lot of mathematics and physics. And what I really like about mathematics, there's always one solution to a problem.
Yeah.
And it's very clear. Yeah. The world is very clear.
It's a formula. It's
I love it.
Yeah.
And it's very relaxing in a way.
It's making a puzzle, right?
Yeah. But then you come to people dynamics and people processes and building up a successful organization or lead a successful organization. And there's a lot of complexity connected to people. How do you reflect on that? Because it's not easy. It's always complex.
Yeah. Well, maths is also very complex.
That's true.
So,
true.
You cannot solve every riddle.
That's true.
Which is completely frustrating at times. But and that's the same, I think, with people. There's no one person the same. So if you think you cracked the nut, think again, because you have a new person and you start all over again. And that's, I think, the beauty, that you need to listen and really listen. You cannot assume that what you know is what the other one knows. And that's what fascinates me, right? So I can try and formulate things, policies, strategies that work for a group, and hopefully, quite successfully, we put some things in place that really work. But in the end, it's all about the people themselves taking that support that they get and then working with that. And there's no one response to that. Everybody has a different view on a situation or on a certain topic, and that's what fascinates me. And every team dynamic is different as well. So if you know how it works and then you can influence that and make an impact, then I'm really happy.
Today we are going to discuss leadership and psychological safety.
Yeah.
And we're also going to discuss the rise of technologies, already going on for decades, but now with AI speeding up things. So I think these are two relevant subjects to touch upon, also from a people officer perspective.
Super relevant,
So looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah.
To start with leadership, you said something about listening.
Yeah.
Can you mention some aspects of leadership that you find important? And I guess listening may be one of them.
Yeah, I think it's one of the essential ones. We have put emphasis on what we call empathic leadership, coming from the back of COVID, where we saw that we really needed a different type of leadership style than we were used to, because we could not, grab the people. We had to form relationship and keep them close to us in a different way. And we said, stay close to your clients, stay close to your people, and take care of yourself. That was like the mantra that we put out there for our leaders. And it marked, I think, a change in how we asked our leaders to connect to their people. And especially in these times with so much going on in the world, I think empathy and compassion are traits for every successful leader to keep people together. And also because you have to amend and adapt to new generations who ask for a different type of connection. And the human deal, the relationship between an employer and an employee, has really changed over the past years. So listening, to come back on your point of listening, is one of the most important skills for a leader who is empathic or wants to be empathic, to get close to your employee or to, I don't know, a client. Because if you truly listen, you can understand the other one's perspectives, and you can meet them where they are, and that's so important. Instead of projecting what you think is the truth, and say, okay, I don't know you, I don't know your situation, and I'm just going to listen and I'm going to ask questions, not because I want to react and say, oh, I had that as well, I have the same experience. You don't have the same experience. So just listen to understand and not to react, because then you're not listening anymore. And that's what we try to skill our leaders in. And we also have an IDE impact program. It is linked to our inclusion and diversity program. Yeah. But it's really about unconscious bias and making our leaders aware that everybody's biased. And you have to deal with that in how you interact with your people. And now everybody has went through that program, or the vast majority has underwent that program. And what you get is a common language in how to address quite sensitive topics sometimes. And it helps to just start the conversation. So that's what we try to do, to get that listening mode activated.
And so you coach them on that listening mode, on empathy, on compassion. I also see why you do it. I also think it's very vital. I think it can be very difficult as a leader that you also have your own agenda. You want to get people somewhere on a mission or towards your goal or towards a target.
Absolutely.
That can be in the way of active listening, of unbiased listening, even also that own agenda. How did you get your leaders on board that they wanted to train this, that they want to develop this?
Well, there's several things, I think. One is we made it mandatory, so it was not really, you had to be there. Yeah. We gave people the time to embark on the program, so it was 2-3 years span of time. So it's not that we forced it directly upon people, but we did say this is important. It's a key priority in our business plan. We believe this is something that you should have underwent, whatever, because it's important to us and it's important to our culture. So it's about belief and about our values, and stimulating our leaders to be a role model for that. And you see again with different generations that people ask for different leadership. So you can just sit there and do what you always did. But in our, let's say, project-driven organization, you won't get the people that you need or want because, they simply don't want to work for you. So there's also that trigger to say, okay, I need to change my ways and I want to change my ways and we need to do this differently. And it requires time. Right, and there's pressure on time because there's scarcity in the labor market. We experience that as well. Leaders have to step in, so there's always that dilemma or that tension to do the right thing and to spend time. But I think in the end, for leaders, it's the most important thing to give time to your people. And then, yes, you want to go places, but you will get places if you spend the time. And if you don't, you cannot, and there was a phrase by a former partner who said, you cannot make grass grow by pulling it. It will just break.
I like that one very much. I sometimes say if you pull the grass, it won't grow faster. It's basically kind of the same.
It's the same.
Yeah. And so you made it mandatory. I think that's clear. I think also you see in practice that if you don't do it, you will not be that successful in your organization.
Exactly.
So it's also really driving success.
Yes.
Have you seen managers that find this difficult, this development?
Of course, there's always leaders who are not by default or by nature empathic leaders, no. And so there's a difference, absolutely. We started the conversation with there's different peoples, there's different perspectives, and you have to be attentive to that as well, and give extra support or be there if there's questions. And as long as the right intention is there, you're good to go.
I'm also learning here myself as a leader. So for me, this is kind of the first bigger company that I founded. We're now at 500 employees. So wow. At the same time also impressive. Learning. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I would like to understand, what should be the balance between that listening mode, that empathy, that understanding, and also that driving that company agenda, driving that team agenda, the output, the targets, the pressure of customers that have their requirements.
Yeah.
How do you look at that balance?
So I think when you it's a matter of balance. We have a methodology that we put in place, I think, which combines it beautifully, which is called PTO, predictability, teaming, and open communication. We started really small, and now it's in our assurance practice. It's for years and years. It's a common methodology that we use, and it is really about psychological safety and having the open conversation about what do I need as an individual during this assignment? What does the team need to function in a good way and be productive to meet the client's needs? And what does the client need to make sure that we meet the expectations of the client? And it's in the end, or in base, is quite simple, because you have an opening of the week and you have that conversation. So what's important for you? What's important for the team? How do we work together? When do you need to leave to do some personal stuff? And what do we do with the client? Well, you have that conversation. So the threshold to discuss whatever is on your mind is very low. And there you balance basically that listening mode and being very empathetic and compassionate with. We also have to be productive. We need to have a result by the end of the week or the month or the whenever. And how are we going to do that together? And it's just one check-in a week and you're good to go, right? So there's a structure or a method to the madness.
I like it very much. I like it because, you make it also that output, those targets, what we need to deliver, you make it also a joint effort, basically. Yes. How are we going to do that?
Yeah.
And that it's also taking people very seriously, the way you describe it. Absolutely. And also treating them as adults.
Yes.
It's not us as leadership that knows best for you. It is together we explore what's best for you to deliver on your targets and to have a good balance in life.
But also to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? So it's not just putting tasks to people. It's really about how do we work together and why do we do the work that we do? Why is this client relevant, or what does the client do for society, and how does that resonate to what we're doing? So it's also painting that bigger picture, and that's super important for job satisfaction and for people being motivated to do the job.
And developing that sense of purpose, that sense of that you matter, you change something in society.
Yeah.
Do people feel that in KPMG?
Yes, they feel that, but in different modes, I would say. Right? Sometimes it feels quite indirect, and at certain point in times, we've got beautiful projects that are directly impacting society or economies, or and then it's very tangible and easy to say, okay, wow, I contributed to that. Sometimes it's a bit more remote, and then you have to help the teams a bit more to make them understand why we do what we do and what the client does and why that's important. Yeah.
And as a C-level leader yourself, do you feel that impact that you make?
Yes.
I say it also because I get the feedback. I sometimes talk too much about numbers, finance. So I've developed, let's say, from an individual contributor as a psychologist myself, feeling impact every day on the people that I was talking to, that were in therapy with me, towards being a C-level leader and, being P&L responsible, deciding on budgets. So there's a lot of euros going on in the boardroom as well.
Absolutely.
So sometimes I got the feedback, Gijs, maybe it's time to tell the people about the impact that we make every day instead of, the road towards break even or the road towards, this big change.
Yeah.
Therefore, my question, how is that for you as a C-level leader?
Well, there again, it's about the balance, because it has to be about numbers, but it shouldn't be all about numbers. And you're talking to a people leader, so I will always put the people, let's say, factor to the table in everything that we do, and it's always there, right? In every board discussion, people is on the agenda, and we talk about it whether it's on culture or performance development or whatever. There's always a people topic which we discuss. apart from the numbers and how we get there. And, we are a people business, so we get there with people. We've got nothing else.
Oh.
So, it's right front and center in everything that we do and in the boardroom as well. Yeah.
Same here. We're also a community in a way.
Of course.
Yeah. We're also talking about psychological safety. I find it a very interesting construct, also a difficult one. Yes. Also a difficult one to align on. What is psychological safety?
Yeah.
Because it's also about feelings. And feelings sometimes are complex. And of course, there's a difference between feelings sometimes and the facts, how things really are. So therefore, I'm very much into that construct, like to understand it. How do you look at psychological safety?
So it's one of the key subjects or priorities that we have in our strategy. We developed a methodology on psychological safety exactly because it's such a, let's say, a container thing. If you're not careful, everything is psychological, such as psychological safety or unsafety or what have you. So we developed a model which consists of, let's say, 4 levels, which makes it super clear because we measure that as well on a yearly basis. What type of safety people mean when they say I don't feel safe, or I have an issue, or I experienced, or I've seen something that doesn't seem right, and we can really pinpoint it. Is it about can you be yourself at work? Do you experience microaggressions? Are there like jokes that you don't like? Or is it about challenging the status quo that is difficult? We have those layers, which makes it very clear what it is about. And it helps the conversation and to pinpoint the issue instead of staying in platitudes. Because, if you have a difficult conversation, you have to give feedback, which is maybe not that positive. People tend to say, well, I'm not sure if I feel safe in this conversation. That's not psychological safety. That's if you are not treated with respect. And it's not to say that if you give feedback, that's not that you're not treating someone with respect. When you give feedback, that's not only positive, right? So that's also the conversation that we're having. And we put together a big toolkit with all kinds of situations that have occurred, but also that you can use to start a conversation, again, to lower that threshold about sometimes a bit sensitive topics, and to make sure that everybody feels, let's say, as comfortable as possible to just start the conversation, following that measurement. All these things are there to start the conversation.
And it doesn't mean you cannot feel tension, for instance,
no,
or it can be difficult to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
And it can be uncomfortable even.
Yeah.
But it does not necessarily mean it's unsafe.
No.
I agree. And those layers that you were talking about, is there some sort of prioritization in that? Is it like a pyramid? Is it?
No. We don't treat it as a pyramid.
Okay.
But you do see that, let's say, inclusion safety is a bit more, let's say, the essential type of safety compared to the challenger safety. Because you can feel real well in your skin when it comes to inclusion safety, but you feel when it comes to challenging the status quo that, to be brave and step up and don't fear anything, just say what's on your mind, might feel a bit, too much at a certain point. And that's a different type of safety than if you feel that you cannot mention what you did over the weekend, for instance. So there is, it's a different type of layer, but it's not that it's an hierarchical layer.
Understand. And with these layers, you also kind of made a definition for what is psychological safety.
Yeah.
You could even have a storyline around these layers.
Yeah, you could.
Saying if you feel psychological, or if there is psychological safety, you would see these behaviors on these 4 layers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you can even measure it in the organization?
We have a measurement. So we do that annually.
Yeah.
And we can play that back per community. And let's say give a photo of the state of affairs, which is a beautiful starting point for a conversation with the team.
Super cool.
And we've got culture coaches that can assist to get the conversation started, to help leaders to get a program together if that's necessary. So I love that concept. It's working well.
Are you also sharing this with the outside world, outside of KPMG?
Absolutely.
I would be very much interested.
Happy to continue the
I think that's really cool. Yeah. To really make this operational is not easy, and you have kind of made very important steps on that.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah, and it drives the conversation. I think that's exactly what you want.
And that's what you want.
Yeah. So, how would you? Someone explained me what is mental well-being. That's difficult. What is mental well-being? And then someone said to me, well, Gijs, for me, it's someone to love, something meaningful to do, and something in the future to feel like, something to hope for in the future. Yeah. And I still like that definition. It always stayed with me. Do I have someone to love? Yes, I'm lucky. I have.
Yeah.
Also children. Do I have something meaningful to do? Yes. Our jobs are very meaningful.
Absolutely.
In the people business, there's a lot of meaning to be found. And then something in the future you would wish for. And that's also nice. Ambition, something that motivates you to get out of bed. Could you give some sort of a definition what psychological safety would be for you?
Well, for me, holistically, it would really mean that everybody feels that they can be themselves at work, and that exactly this, they have something to aspire to, that that they want to work for and with, and of course, it's important that you feel loved. If you're not feeling loved, you are not the best version of yourself. You cannot explore. You cannot, we talked about taking the plunge. You will not be adventurous, right? So, and that's, I think, the same with psychological safety. It's about shaping an environment where people dare to stand for themselves, speak their minds, whatever it is, however small things are, that they dare to stand up and say, this is occupying my mind and I want to talk about it. And that for me is psychological safety, that there's no inhibition to come with whatever is on your mind. And of course, then if you've got that, I think that's the basis for a strong culture and for success. So for me, that's psychological safety. A very holistic definition, but that's what it is if I would have to, let's say, make a picture of it.
I like it very much. We have defined the learning zone. And the learning zone where people are there to make that step, for instance, that you were describing. You want to have that psychological safety as you describe it, including appreciation, feeling understood, feeling heard. And of course, you want to also be explicit about what we expect from you. What is the next step? What is logical for you to do, so that you can really develop yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a direction, right? You cannot be yourself and be happy if you're just being. Yeah. That's not well-being in itself, right? So you have to have that purpose and direction, clarity of what you can and cannot do.
It's an interesting development. It would be very interesting. We don't have that here, of course, but to speak to a people officer of 50 years ago to talk about the dilemmas back then. But I think this is a very interesting time.
In a way, I think the topic would maybe be the same. The only thing is there would not be a label on it of psychological safety, because that's, let's say, the time frame in which they back then lived. But they had more or less the same type of discussions and dilemmas, right? That's because people in itself are still very curious beings. Yeah. And there's always the same type of discussions around that. But what comes to the forefront is really what's happening in the world, which is spotlighted. And then, things develop and suddenly you call it psychological safety. But 50 years back, people experienced this as well. Yeah. But there was no name for it.
Now we're developing a new language together.
Yeah, we are.
That's describing kind of what is natural to us.
Right? It's a zeitgeist as well.
True. Yeah. Technology, AI, can be threatening to people.
Yeah.
A lot of knowledge workers, of course, have started using ChatGPT, are impressed to some extent or not impressed, depending on how they experience ChatGPT, for instance. Yeah. How do you look at the role of technology, AI, in the workplace?
I think it's there to stay, right? Yeah. It will increase ever more. So I think that's something that, I can imagine that people are scared because sometimes, jobs will change or might even vanish, and people fear for their jobs. But I think with the new developments of AI, there's only going to be more new roles and more development, and I think there's also a big beauty in that development. But it's also a bit like the internet of 2 decades ago. We also found that very scary, and we thought, wow, the Big Bang, and now everything is going to go haywire when we hit 2000. Yeah. Well, that went well, right? So we still existed, and but there was a big change in the labor market. There was friction, unemployment. There was a big shift that we had to get used to. And I think with the technology and the developments which are rapidly evolving now around AI, we are in some sort of a same situation, but it will not go away. So that's also, I think, the duty of care of employers to make sure that people, they don't fear what's happening, but that they can ride that wave, even though it's a bit scary, but that you support them as well in how do you then ride that wave instead of just hitting your little boat against the waves, and they won't go away. The water will just flood over you. So you have to find a way to turn your little boat and ride that wave. And I think that's what we need to do as employers, to support our people in that, because again, it's not going away.
How do you do this in the organization? How do you make sure that people are open to ride the wave?
Well, train them. So we've got a big portfolio of both e-learnings, but also workshops related on the topic or to the topic, and especially the workshops. They are overbooked, and I think that's also because we are a very young organization. The average age is 34. Which means we've got 50% of our people is below 30 years of age. Very young population, quite, let's say, digitally native or agnostic. So they like this type of thing, working with Gen AI and how to prompt and how can you get the best out of AI. So that's a big investment in learning and development, making sure that it's not scary. We give it in the hands of our people. They know how to work with it. And that helps tremendously in moving beyond the worries of what it could also mean. And we are in a lucky situation because of the scarcity. For people, it's much more about how can AI help me alleviate a bit of the burden of the repetitive work so that I can spend time on the more complex and more challenging tasks. So for us, it's actually contributing to well-being. Instead of that, it is a worry for people in itself.
Do you have an example of that? How it's really supporting your people also with their well-being, with their workload, with the repetitive tasks?
Well, one of the examples is in advisory, where we started, we implemented an internal Gen AI, not via the open chat because of all the, of course, let's say the privacy, all the client data that we have. We need to really protect that. But the closed environment is tremendously helping people to work faster, get information faster, which resulted in one example where a junior consultant said, well, I was finished so fast that I waited a day before I send it to my manager, because otherwise I would get questions about that's really quick. Is it okay? Did you look close enough? So it's really getting used to the fact that it frees up time to spend on analyzing, critical thinking, reviewing other stuff. And now we are, it's out there for a couple of months, so we are getting used to that. So that's one of the examples that you now see that it can really help boost productivity if you use it well. Because again, if you don't know how to prompt, then you cannot get the maximum out of that tool. And what you see is that then people tend to not use it that much because, if the output is not really helping you, why would you use it again? So to train people in how to use it correctly and really help get the max out of the tool is a good thing to do.
And do you think it will change also what you search for in your colleagues, or what you search for in new colleagues that enter the firm? they need to do prompting.
Yeah, that's one of the skills.
Will it be more like engineers instead of consultants, or will it be always consultants with engineering skills?
No, so we have our Center of Excellence build a tool, a workforce.ai tool, and that deconstructs job profiles in certain tasks. And it has also portrayed what type of tasks could be, let's say, alleviated by AI and what type of tasks couldn't. And when you look at that, you see that AI can contribute for around 70% when it comes to data crunching, evaluating data analysis and stuff like that. But it can only support 25% max when it comes to relational tasks or tasks that you need interpretation and interaction with, like decision making, coordinating work of others, stuff like that. So our belief is that AI is really a great technology tool to alleviate, let's say, the repetitive and the, let's say, administrative tasks. But it will never replace the human brain and the conscience that you need to make decisions and to put that critical thinking to mind. There's no conscience in AI, so we have to be that moral compass. It's real human work. It will never be taken over by technology. So also in recruitment, we will, for sure, stay on the course of hiring consultants, which are absolutely human, and they need their relationship skills, but there will be different skills, right? So we will need more professional judgment, critical thinking, and less, let's say, the real data architects, or you also need them, but not in a consulting core profile, which is actually tending more than towards the relational skills, the interpersonal skills, than to other skills.
It is so interesting because in that sense you could even connect it to the first discussion about leadership and psychological safety. That's also about developing your interpersonal skills.
Yes, absolutely.
And this basically is also about developing those interpersonal skills, because that's what will remain with us as human beings.
Yeah.
And then we have the technology to go into the data, to make the first analysis, but that high touch, that human touch will always remain as part of our role.
Yeah, that's a firm belief.
Yeah, so high tech, high touch as the vision.
Yeah, correct.
You mentioned you do it internally, the technology development as well, or the model, that because of safety. Are there ethical dilemmas that you see in the use of AI next to, of course, data security, safety, that you also are addressing in KPMG?
Within KPMG, there's always ethical dilemmas that you need to tend to. Especially when it comes to technology, you have to be very mindful of what you put in place, because you want to prevent, for instance, when it comes to recruitment, you want to prevent an AI tool creating severe bias. We've seen examples of that in other companies. So we are very mindful of that, and we've already put in place a couple of years back AI-inspired, let's say, technology for the first selection, and that works very well because we thought carefully about how to put that in place, and you always ask yourself the question, it might be possible, but is it also ethical, right? So what does it bring, but also what could happen if it was trained the wrong way or used in the wrong way. So in this case, we see that it really benefits because we now have a 50-50, let's say, gender parity at entry level in our selection process. And that's exactly what we wanted, because we have a complete, let's say, bias-free first selection. Now there's new developments, providers are putting AI in all their platforms.
Yes.
So now it's really also for ourselves internally to carefully assess what is the AI which works for us when it comes to our strategy. So does it fit our strategy, and does it fit our values? Because, putting everything to use, you cannot afford it because it's super expensive. And you might do something which is harmful to, for instance, your strategy or your values. So we assess that very carefully before we say, yes, let's go.
I like that very much. I think we should also learn and then how to prompt the AI based on our values.
Yes, and you can train AI positively, right, in terms of the positive values, which is great. But again, it will not. It doesn't have a conscious, so it will not give you right or wrong. That's really the assessment that we have to make with the outcome of what the system gives us. Let's say, yeah.
I've learned you can have multiple AI agents also checking the other AI agent.
Yeah.
For instance, on values.
Yeah.
But you can never guarantee that it's a correct outcome.
No, and it's really the remit, I think, of us as human beings. One of our values is integrity. I cannot imagine how AI can tell me what integrity is and what integrity looks like in human behavior. Yeah, he can state it, say this is what it should look like, but what does it do in practice? And what if you face an ethical dilemma where integrity stands against, I don't know, excellence?
Yeah.
It will not say what's right or wrong. That's what we need to define, let's say, together in a conversation with each other, because these are values that are equally important, but in some situations they are opposing each other. And AI is not going to solve that. It's not going to say the one is better than the other, because you trained it to say these are two positive values. Good for you. And then what? Because in a situation you have to make a choice. And that's what we need to do. We need to put that critical thinking to mind. We need to discuss that together and say, hey, this is important in this situation, but I also want to deliver the best to the client. And I need to stay ethical, but how do I do that? How do I combine the two? And then sometimes you have to make a choice. Yeah, again, that's not something a system can solve for you.
I can imagine that you have discussions among colleagues as well around these ethical dilemmas when they arise.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Very interesting discussions, I guess.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And really green field. We are searching, also, navigating our way.
Yeah, we're just at the beginning.
Yeah. We touched upon quite some subjects. So we talked about leadership, psychological safety, AI and technology. We started the conversation about learning and taking a chance. You moving to the United States, for instance, Berkeley. If you look at your future, what do you expect? What are your expectations, your wishes? What kind of jumps will you make? What do you really, foresee in the future for yourself?
Well, the taking the plunges will definitely stay. That's, I think, who I am. So taking a chance and just go, that fits me. I've got no clue what the future holds for me. I hope beautiful things, but we will see. So stay true to myself and stay curious. I think that's what I try to practice and do every day. And that's probably going to lead me to some beautiful places. But, there's a lot going on in the world. So that's also occupying my mind. And it will definitely impact where the road will lead me. But we'll see.
And you said as well about KPMG, it feels like coming home, like being home.
Yeah.
And that's of course a great environment to be curious and to look at the external world on what you can add in terms of value.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a very good mix.
It does.
Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. It's beautiful, beautiful conversation.
Thank you. Yes. Likewise.
Thank you.